So, yes, you have to you're reporting to a single LRS as you go through. So yes, one address.
Okay. Do you have to define these specifically for each element on each page, or can a template-based definition be applied to the entire course content? So assuming the statements.
So now what was that question again?
Do you have to define these specifically for each element on each page, or can you use more like a template-based definition that applies to the entire project?
Oh, certainly. You can,
Course?
and maybe inheritance, right? So yeah, you can certainly put these at the title level or anything. I mean, it's a standard action, so anywhere an action would be. So if you want to put it so that it's inherited from every page and the way it goes, absolutely, you can do it that way.
Here's a good one. Can you use TinCan answers in the course itself as well as in the LMS? So for example, show page 2 only if TinCan recorded TinCan interaction X.
The TinCan interaction itself is not a variable you can use as a condition in an action, but because it is an action, you can easily have another action that sets a variable or sets some data or does whatever it is you need to do that you can then act upon. So yes, and the answer, I guess, is yes and no to that. You certainly can do that. It's not that TinCan statement itself is not a conditional thing. It's not something you can use as a condition. But because it's an action, you can just add an action to set set something that you can have a condition on later.
Mm-hmm. Unique ID, can you explain it more on how it needs to be a URL, and will it work if it isn't a valid URL?
So the unique ID, again, was the activity ID we talked about here. And this is a very important concept. Yes, it needs to be a URL. It needs to be in the form of a URL. That's one of the specifications of TinCan 1.0. Does it need to be valid? That would depend upon your LMS. This is not a valid URL, by the way. And SCORM Cloud allows that not to be a valid URL. But this is the globally unique identifier. So let's say you create the next great course in the world, and it's going to be used all over the place, and you're going to sell it and make tons of money, and it's going to be on 100 different LMSs out there or sold commercially. It needs to have a unique ID because someone else may create it, and it may have the same name. I've called this TinCanIW. Maybe someone else created another one called TinCanIW. If those are both loaded on the same LRS, they will conflict. They have to have a way to uniquely identify themselves. This is that. So that's why we suggest that you put your own company's URL here in uniqueurl.com, so that no one else will use. I'm assuming that no one else will use your company's URL when they are creating a course. But it gives you a unique identifier. These are in the form of URLs because they obviously give you the option of creating something unique. If you use your own company's URL, no one else should use your URL to define.
Now, John, what about for Lectora Express LMS, which was just announced? Is there plans for that to support TinCan statements?
Absolutely, and that you might see that first with TinCan. It lends itself very well to that. The free-form aspect of that is certainly something you could imagine seeing in there, and I think would be very helpful in LMS Express.
Okay. Another question here. Sounds like the reporting end of the data will be a challenge. Summarizing for a course all of the responses for a particular action, like visiting a rollover. Will LRSs handle this, or is the admin person expected to take all the LRS data and analyze it?
I would hope that the LRS will handle it. That is obviously something that the LRS vendors will, and really we are using LRS, but these are the LMS vendors of today. They are all working on it. I know for a fact. I've spoken to many of them. It's in the progress right now because there's quite a lot to do. It'll take a little while to get out. And again, it's a young standard. It's going to take a little while for it to be fully supported, but you will see it roll out. I think you're going to see some great support on it on these LMSs out there for reporting and a lot of information. But the good thing is if it doesn't provide what you need, as you've seen, the statements are fairly simple to look at and use. You'll be able to download these and put them in Excel and report on it any way you want to report on them as well.
Someone else writes, I read that it can capture results from anywhere, no matter if it's connected to an LMS or not. How does it work? For example, send a course to someone who does not have a regular internet connection and record the result once it's connected.
Sure. That's one of the selling points. Technically, behind the covers, it allows for that. TinCan is what they call stateless. I think I mentioned that before, so that it doesn't require login. Each interaction, each statement that is sent up lives kind of on its own. It should have all of the information it needs to live on its own. Right now, with a course, you do need login information. You need to know where it's reporting to. You need to know who's logged into it, and some additional information that is not necessarily there. That is provided by something like an LMS. However, with a small wrapper shell, you could provide that information to a course. In truth, all of that information is on the URL, the command line that gets passed to a course. And so if you knew all of that information, you could set up a link to a course that would do that. But it will, unlike SCORM and AICC, which have to reside in an LMS in order to work, or at least some sort of a LMS shell that report to it later, TinCan will allow that. Now, the question of it being disconnected and reporting later, that would obviously need some sort of a capturing wrapper, if you will, around it that would capture it. I think you're going to see a lot of those wrappers being written. I think you'll see them for mobile as well that'll capture that information and pass it up later. There should be a lot of activity in that area coming on.
Great, thanks, John. Is the welcome screen / course launch screen you showed a Lectora LMS or part of the TinCan software? I think that was the SCORM cloud you were working with.
Oh, yeah, if they're referring to this screen where we went in, this is the SCORM cloud. If you're referring to the welcome screen for the course, I mean, this is just part of the course. So whichever you were referring to there.
How does TinCan handle conflicts with unique identifiers like the activity URL or username? Will TinCan allow for universities to insert a unique user ID like student number?
So yes, much like your LMS today, you will have an ID and password. In order to report all this, you do have to have an ID and password or some sort of unique identifier. It can work on TinCan supports what's called OAuth authentication. It's a very technical and geeky term for a standard, an authentication standard, which is supported by login by Facebook, login. You've seen these buttons, login with Facebook, login with Twitter before. Those use what's called OAuth identification under the covers. TinCan can support that. You do have to have some way to uniquely identify yourself. At a very minimum, it should be an email, but it can be much more than that. So yes, you can have it go anyway. More than likely, the standard case, especially for courses, this will be uploaded to a combination LMS, LRS. You will log in the same way you do today, and so that will be your login information. If that is your student ID, then that is the login information that will be used.
Is the SCORM Cloud a Lectora program, and is it available now?
SCORM Cloud is from Rastisi Software. It is not a Lectora program. It is available now. It has been around for quite some time. Rastisi is a company that was kind of the shepherd, if you will, of the TinCan effort that went on. And so the ADL, which is the same body that standardized SCORM, the ADL was in charge of TinCan as well, but they let Rastisi really kind of shepherd as it went through. So it is still an ADL standard. It is the next generation of SCORM, but Rastisi was kind of the shepherd, and they owned SCORM.com previously, and they were kind of the ones that set up the first TinCan LRS, if you will. But it's free to use and it's available now.
Oops, sorry. We have a couple questions here. I'm going to try to summarize them all into one because they're all kind of on the same aspect. But someone's asking, if you don't have a learning management system, where is this information stored? Already you've answered anywhere, but I need to particularly know where it's stored. And then someone's asking, is this data, where is it stored? Is it variables? Kind of like how our variables work in Lectora. Like, where is this information? So there seems to be a lot of questions about where they can generate this information if they don't have a learning management system.
So because there's, again, I'm not totally clear on the question if you're referring to the content of the course or the statements that the course is reporting. So the content of the course needs to reside on a web server somewhere so that you can, truthfully, if you created a package around it, you could actually do it on different things. But in the standard case, the course needs to reside on a web server, and it needs to report to an LRS. So the course data would be on a web server. The data does have to, if you don't have an LMS, you do have to at least have an LRS to report to. And that the data from the course, all of the statements from the course, will go to that LRS.
Right, so there's nowhere that they're going to generate that they can pull if they don't have an LRS. They don't
right. It has
get
to talk.
embedded. Right.
It's speaking a language, it's speaking French, and it's going to have to talk to someone who understands French. And that if they're just talking alone, there's no one they're talking to, the data won't be kept somewhere.
Okay. Can you use TinCan on SharePoint?
SharePoint. I don't know that, not as super familiar with SharePoint. I don't know what their support would be for multi-file output. Don't know if they have a way you can just create a directory, but if you had a way to do that, you would be able to give it a launch link. It would not be easy. SharePoint does not natively support TinCan currently today, but you would need to create a launch URL for it that would have all of the login information. You'd have to have a way to get that and then put it in.
Okay. Can you recommend a beginner's guide to SCORM?
SCORM?
One thing I could recommend is just a couple of weeks ago we presented an Inspiration Wednesday all about SCORM, specifically using SCORM with Lectora content. So definitely check out the archived webinar section of our website, and I think that'll give you a nice, good, solid foundation of what SCORM is. But you can always, I think it's just SCORM.com, or they have information out on the web. Okay, here's a question. Just want to be clear, does TinCan information reside in an LMS like HealthStream, and can you briefly review where I can find the information? I think this is the same kind of question now that you've been answering.
Right, and yeah, HealthStream doesn't have TinCan support right now, so it can't talk to HealthStream LMS, but I can, I don't know this, but I can guarantee you that someone at HealthStream is working on that right now and implementing in that, because everyone is. That's what's going on right now.
Is it possible to put a minimum effort criterion on an action for it to report to TinCan, i.e. a user has to spend a minimum amount of time on a launched website before it is reported as an experienced action?
So can you work on minimum?
Almost like put a condition, really.
Yeah, it'd probably be a condition. You could you could have a timer, and then you could check that against a minimum condition, something like that. I mean, it's it's any kind of thing you can do with Lectora before. It's not, the TinCan statement itself is new, but the way it works as an action is not new. So anything you could do with an action before, if you had a way to show something if they were out of time, you have a timer, the timer runs out, you have them stop taking a test, that kind of thing. That same thing can be done for TinCan statements. Any condition, any way you can do things now, you can do it with TinCan statements.
Do you see the possibility of TinCan statements to gather numerical data to more easily use the data to validate a course?
Sure. You can, with a TinCan statement, so if you look at these TinCan statements, one of the things you can do is you can use any variable. So if the variable is a numeric, you can even use random values, although I can't imagine you really want to report on a random value. But you can put in any of your variables. So if you have things like your score, although the score is automatically reported, but anything you create in your course can have a value. It could be a numeric value, and that will be added into that. So you can have that work in that way.
Perfect. When you publish to TinCan, does the test score and other SCORM functions like lesson status still report as usual to the LMS?
Yes. That's one of the nice things. If you're really, let's say your LMS has gone to TinCan and now everything needs to be TinCan, you don't need to change. If you're already getting everything you need to get out of your course, you don't have to change anything. You just publish to TinCan and you'll get all the information you got from SCORM previously.
Is Trivantis participating in the TinCan standards working groups?
We participated early on, and we were working with Rustisi on that. We have definitely been in contact with them all along. We are looking to do that going forward as well.
Good. I've heard about TinCan having the ability to allow a user who is disconnected from the internet to go through a TinCan course, and then later, when internet connected